For me, painting my boat was a pretty daunting task. You've got 2-part polyurethane, epoxy based, 1 part mixing and priming and dewaxing. I've wanted to freshen up my boat for years, but every time I started to dig into it, I was quickly overwhelmed. But I finally did it. I hunkered down, learned all the things, and got the paint job done. And to make it easier for you, here's what I learned. I used Petit EZ-Poxy, and I'll get to why. But first, some super simple practical things I think you should know if you're going to tackle this job. And I will keep it very, very simple. So if you're stuck in analysis paralysis like I was, I hope that I can pull you through it and get you painting. Step 1, de-wax. I won't bore you with the details, except know that this is the first step no matter what you do next. Get a good de-waxing agent. I chose this one from Pettit, and my reasoning for that will be clear in a few minutes. Basically, you're just going to wash your boat with a scrubby pad, one of these green things, and you're going to use the de-waxer as your soap. I scrubbed the whole boat, stem to stern, and it was pretty easy other than having to move the ladder constantly. A thought on scaffolding while I'm here. If my boat was any taller than her 5'5" keel makes her while on the hard, I would have rented probably 30 feet of scaffolding, about 4 feet high. But standing on the box side of my truck actually worked really well for me, so I skipped scaffolding. The de-waxer cleans the surface of the boat from any products that are on it, including mold and grease. If you skip this step and just start sanding, you'll push the grease or wax further into the gel coat and the new paint won't want to stick. So do this step. Step 2 is sanding. This is the biggest part of the job, and this will take really however long it takes. The smoother the finished surface is, the better. Pettit asked for 220 grit, so that's what I brought it to. My boat had these stripes on it, so I cut them down with 40 grit and then sanded the whole boat smooth to 80 grit, and then 120, and finally 220. This took several days in the hot sun, but this is what makes or breaks your paint job. If you don't have these multi-level stripes on your boat though, it'll probably be a lot easier for you. While I was sanding, I took the opportunity to fix any imperfections in the hull. I used Interlux watertight 2-part. It's basically like Bondo, but much, much stronger. Mix it 1-to-1 and slap it on. It sands very nicely to a perfect finish, and it seals whatever repairs you've made. On sanders, while we're here, I used every orbital sander I had in the garage, and I borrowed some too, and the only one that still works is my DeWalt. The sanders have to run for hours and hours and hours in the worst conditions that they've probably ever seen, so this will be their ultimate test. I would say get a good couple of sanders and a buddy to help you. For sandpaper, I went on Amazon. Sandpaper to me used to be really expensive, but I bought these discs that come in boxes, which are way cheaper than I remember ever paying for sandpaper. The joys of global industry, I suppose. I went through 2 boxes of these for my 35-footer. Your mileage may vary. With the whole boat smooth and perfect to 220 grit, it was time to prime. Now I'm going to tell you about my paint choice. In all my years of research, I found customer reviews and different articles and stuff that put Petit EZ-Poxy as the easiest amateur product to get good results with. It's a 1-part paint, so not even I could screw that up. I did cut it with 5% of their Pettit thinner because it was super hot outside and that's what they said to do. The paint was very thick. And that was probably the hardest part of the whole process as far as mixing chemicals goes. I bought these mixer sticks on Amazon for my screw gun drill, and they worked like a charm. They mixed the paint very quickly and very evenly. Then, with a very short nap roller, I primed the boat. I also chose Pettit based on color options. I live in Canada, which means ordering custom colors from any of these manufacturers in the US would have been much more difficult for me because of shipping and customs and things. It was far easier for me to buy an off-the-shelf color that was already sitting in a chandlery here in Canada. If you've ever looked at boat paint though, you'll know that the manufacturers aren't exactly imaginative with their colors. You get what you get if you're buying off the shelf. I wanted something unique, and the most unique thing I could find was seafoam green. And of all the seafoam greens, Pettit's was the one I liked the most. Anyway, step 3, I primed the boat from the ground with a roller with a 4-foot handle, and it was all very easy. Up, down, up, down. The primer lays thick and definitely needs to be sanded back to 220 between coats. and I could still see the blue of the boat under the first coat, so I hit it with a second coat. The 220 sand between coats was kind of easy because I'd already been around and around this boat so many times sanding it to get it to 220 in the first place. I kind of had a system in place. I used the box of the truck on one side and a ladder and the gunnel of the houseboat next to me to sit on while I was sanding the other side. This is tiring work, sanding this much, but this is part of the job, and genuinely it's the hardest part of the job. The painting is actually really easy. And step 4 was applying the paint. I sanded the second coat of primer with 220 very lightly. The Pettit primer will burn through very fast if you're too aggressive, so I was pretty gentle with the sander. The paint is actually much easier to use than the primer, surprisingly. It's thinner and it flows much better. I cut it with 5% thinner as Pettit recommends for hot weather, and the plan was to roll and tip it, and I've watched 1,000 roll and tip videos on YouTube. I've seen all of them. But I actually found it unnecessary. This was a big surprise to me. Starting at the stern, I went up, down with the roller, and as I ran out of paint, I doubled back over what I'd already painted. Then reloaded the roller from the tray and started a new section, again, doubling back over my work as the roller had less paint in it. This left absolutely no roller lines or marks of any kind. I'm not sure why people tip the paint with a brush, because I really didn't have to. After about 20 minutes, a whole side of the hull was done. Wait a day, hit it with 220, and have at it again for your second coat. The one complaint I have about Petit EZ-Poxy is this. I got a very slight orange peel effect on the final coat. Nothing I did would stop that from happening. It's so slight, in fact, that most people didn't even see it, but I know it's there, so it's going to bother me. I took to the internet to see why, and what I found from other Pettit users was that if they laid the paint when the air temperature was exactly 72 degrees, this didn't happen. I laid my paint on the shady side of the hull, of course, but the air temperature was well over 72, probably more like 78. I tried my best to paint earlier before the temperature went up that high, but it is what it is. A very slight orange peel for my first ever boat paint job is an acceptable result for me. So far, the boat's been sailed and raced and run pretty hard this year, and the paint's holding up very well. It feels hard and tough, and the color's incredibly bright out on the water. I saw my sister boat, somebody who has the same boat as me, out there, and I hardened up and sailed straight at her, and her owner commented, "I could see you coming from a mile away. The color is so vibrant and bright." If you're thinking about painting your boat but stuck in that information overload, I urge you to just do it. Once you're done a paint job, you'll wonder what the fuss was all about, honestly. People argue on the internet endlessly about which paint is better and how to apply it, but in the end, it's just paint, and it's just a boat. We're not painting the Mona Lisa on the side of the space shuttle here. It really is a lot easier than the internet would have you believe. While I have you, please don't forget to click subscribe and let us know in the comments what you'd like to see on Practical Sailor in the future. I'll see you guys next time.